question will be, is a wealth tax a good or bad idea? Do we want to tax accumulations of wealth to increase to reduce inequality of wealth? Does so, or does it risk punishing success and innovation? The debate about wealth tax touches not only on economics, but the deeper question of what truly drives human well-being. So research shows that happiness tends to rise with a logarithm of income, meaning that as wealth grows, each extra dollar contributes less and less to overall life satisfaction. This insight raises an intriguing moral practical question. If the wealthiest experience only slight decreases in happiness from higher taxes, could a well-designed wealth tax improve overall social well-being without major personal sacrifice? So that's what we're going to cover tonight. And I'll first address the question about consumption tax versus income tax versus wealth tax. So today, and I need to add a note to myself to add another event for how to do income tax right, because right now there's a big loophole in the income tax world, and I'll describe what it is. Let me actually send an email to myself for this so that I can get it done. What it is basically if you are an ultra high net worth or even a reasonably high net worth individual and you have a good tax advisor, what they'll do is they'll tell you, don't take an income, don't take a salary, don't get paid in cash. What you do is you get paid in stock. And getting paid in stock is not taxed. And what you can then do is you borrow money against the value of that stock, and you can borrow as much as you want against the value of the stock to the level that someone will fund you. But for the right stocks, then you can sell that stock or you can borrow against that stock and it's not considered income. So you don't even have to pay capital gains tax. So what that means is that the wealthy, like Elon Musk, can get away with, like, I think his effective tax rate is 1 to 2%. And he's the wealthiest person in the world, or at least he might have been surpassed by Larry Ellison, because of the whole AI boom. But he's up there. He's one of the top wealthiest people in the world, and to be paying that low of a tax to me just doesn't make sense. But I'll talk about how we can try to make that more fair. I will do another event on income tax so that we can talk about how to make income tax more fair, because it's also not fair to, people who are making, say, 500,000 to $1 million a year, that they're paying a higher effective tax rate than Elon Musk. That doesn't make sense either. Even someone paying $200,000 a year doesn't have the tax advisors to get their tax rate down to 1 to 2%, whereas Elon Musk does. So consumption tax, people can basically choose not to consume, luxury goods. And, if they're not consuming high cost luxury goods, then there's really not an effective way to tax them because they can just keep their money and store it away for a rainy day. And that money basically doesn't get utilized by the economy, which basically means the money just sits there and grows for them, and they don't leverage it very much. They just leverage it when they need to. And then it doesn't help grow the economy because it's just stuck in a place that is growing more money for the individual, sort of inflating stock values. So that consumption tax, I don't think is a great idea. Mind you, people will still consume, right? There's still going to be wealthy people who consume. There are always exceptions to every rule, but I don't think it's the ideal type of tax. Whereas a wealth tax, I think is actually a very ideal type of tax because it only taxes people who have over a certain amount of net worth. And the idea there is, as we talked about, basically only people over a certain net worth would be effective. So unless you're a high net worth individual, this wouldn't affect you in any way, shape, or form. So there's no practical implication. You don't get taxed. Only very wealthy people get taxed. And as we talked about, the high net worth individuals lose very little money for a significant amount of tax. And that's only if they lose money. I will explain to you actually what the proposal is and the rationale. Basically, the idea is that well, actually, let me first start with what a wealth tax is. So, to be clear, a wealth tax is an annual tax on the net worth of an individual. So you take all of someone's assets, you subtract all of someone's debts away from those assets. That's the amount of assets that you own as a person. And unlike income, it basically taxes the amount of money that you possess or the amount of value that you possess as an individual, even in terms of, if you have a $10 million painting, that's part of your net worth, right? And so you can't just hide assets, you can't just hide value away in terms of assets. When you have a wealth tax, you're taxed on all of your wealth. And basically, this is a way to help wealth inequality by allowing the people who can afford to pay a tax to pay a reasonable tax. And doing so, you'll see, can have a huge net positive impact on society after a while. And I'll also talk about how that wealth tax doesn't even have to be indefinite. It can actually be a limited term wealth tax and still have a huge net positive impact on society. So, but I personally think that it should be indefinite, but it doesn't need to be. So, um, next, we talked about, well, we mentioned sort of lightly on the rising income inequality. If you look at our country in the US and you look at the whole world as a whole, income inequality is at an all-time high. We really haven't seen this kind of income inequality, pretty much ever in our country's history. And this is a global phenomenon where the wealthy are getting wealthier and the poor are either stagnating or getting poorer. With the recent what I call the big ugly bill, there's been a big redistribution of wealth from the poorest of the poor to the wealthy, which if you're gonna redistribute, I think it should be in the opposite direction, not stealing from the poor to give to the wealthy. I like Robin Hood's MO a little bit better than that one. Um, that said, there are tax gaps or like tax system gaps, and that a lot of forms of wealth are basically not taxed under income tax, like I mentioned, whereas a wealth tax can make things that are otherwise untaxed be taxed. Now, and so you're only taxing the people who can afford to have the tax without really significant. Actually, I believe that it's actually without any negative impact on their happiness. And I'll try to make that argument. If I don't make that argument by the end of the presentation, ask me to make it, and I will. But I'm pretty sure it's covered in a slide. So next, it can raise quite a bit of revenue. It's a big potential tax generator if you take it on in a big way. And this is where I'm going to go big or go home and propose a pretty large wealth tax. But you'll see that it's actually a very fair wealth tax, fairness being part of our first intention and one of the guiding lights of the Freethinker Institute. We want to be fair first and foremost. So I'd much rather do what's fair than what's going to make me the most money. And I would argue we should all want that. So that said, so one of the problems with not having a wealth tax is if you have a consumption tax, it basically incentivizes people to hoard wealth, and they don't need to invest their money to make more money. If you have a large amount of wealth, and I'm going to propose basically a wealth tax for over $50 million, just to be like way up there, like this affects a very small percentage of the population. I think it could go down to as low as 20 million, but all my calculations assume no one under $50 million gets any tax from the wealth tax whatsoever, and there's no additional burden of tracking or anything like that for people under $50 million. Once you get to 20 million, then the tracking starts, and then when you get to 50 million, the tax starts. So this basically limits dynastic wealth to some degree and intergenerational accumulation of fortunes. So if someone like Elon Musk, when he dies, he's going to leave so much money to every one of his, I don't know how many kids now, 20 or so, which I actually think is a good thing. I think people like Elon Musk that are super smart should be having more kids. So I kind of agree with him on pronatalism. But it's a different story for another day. Just tells you that I don't mind disagreeing with people that I dislike because I don't like Elon Musk very much. But I do think that's a good idea. So I do think that you know, encouraging tax on in a way that doesn't cost anyone happiness is a good thing. It also and basically let me explain sort of how that would work. So, um, the wealthy, let me see if I have. Oh, well, let me first go into the basically the way the tax. Let me explain the way that it works. So the way that the tax works, even at the very highest level, which is over $100 million of wealth, the tax is lo much higher than existing wealth taxes, but it is low enough that even a non-high net worth individual like myself that did, you know, enough basic personal finance research to know how to invest money in a not stupid way, I could basically break even on all the wealth I had over $100 million with a very simple no-cost strategy. You just park the money in the right place and you're not losing any money with that 10% tax. You just put it in an S&P 500 index fund and you basically losing nothing. So there really is no effective tax rate because you can always get, and there's always risk to the stock market, but the S&P 500 has done 10 to 11% after dividends since its founding in the 50s. I think it was 55. And so basically the wealthy know how to invest, or they should know how to invest, but usually they're probably putting money in wealth managers' pockets who take a big percentage of their money to invest for them. But if they were really smart, they would be investing in an index fund. And if they were to do that, they would actually lose no money. They might gain 1% by parking their money in the S&P 500. So um, it's really not going to lower their income in any way, shape, or form, um, because or lower the amount of money that they have access to in any way, shape, or form because they're actually making as much money as they're paying in tax. But let's talk about some of the challenges to a wealth tax because there are some pretty big challenges, but I think I have good solutions on how to address those challenges. First is what if people decide to leave? Let's say we do a wealth tax in the US, like I'm proposing. Well, a lot of people say, well, all the wealthy will leave. Well, there's a lot of evidence that wealthy people don't actually leave because they have such strong social networks in their geography of choice. They don't want to start all those relationships over again. And there is something, even if you can fly halfway across the world to see your friends, you maybe don't want to do that every weekend. That's a lot on the body to be traveling time zones so much. A lot of people would really rather pay the tax and stay in their place that they have their social network and their good friends that they've made up throughout their lifetime. Now, the other thing is that um, basically you would have to create uh, an alliance of free world countries. And if you took the OECD countries, which are the most developed countries in the world, all of whom, by the way, have a national health care other than the United States, if you took all of those countries and you were to have an alliance, and I talked about this, I think it was the January, if it wasn't, I think it was January of last year, I talked about my plan for ending unjust wars. I also presented it to an offshoot of the Davos community. And basically, my plan for ending unjust wars creates an alliance between a defensive alliance between all of the free world democracies so that if any one of them gets attacked, they all come to each other's defense and that almost anyone can join the alliance. I personally now think, after doing the research for this project or the wealth tax, I think that a wealth tax needs to be opted into by everybody in that defensive alliance. And if you were to do that, basically the only way that someone could avoid paying the 10% tax rate over $100 million is if they park all their money into a country that has an authoritarian government, which, well, let's face it, your money's not safe in a country with an authoritarian government. So no one's going to do that. No one's going to try to avoid the tax, or at least no one smart is going to try to do that because as soon as they do, their money's just going to be taken over by the political people in that country. And they're going to say, well, I know that was money in your bank account, but now it's mine. And the politician will take their money and there's no recourse because there's no legal system that will hold them accountable. And countries that would do that would be like China or, a lot of Russia would be very willing to do that. And so if you go to a country that doesn't necessarily value rule of law over power, then your money would be at risk. And so this alliance would be one of places that value rule of law over power. Um, and value democracy over power. And if you watch that video on the how to end unjust wars, you'll see that I think that that could be a solution that really gets us out of unjust wars and moves us into a place where there are very few human rights violations and where there are stable democratic governments that represent the people all around the world. But that said, I'm digressing a little. What are the negative effects on investment and entrepreneurship? Some people might say, well, that's going
Hey,
to
Gary,
discourage Chris.
are you able to make the slides a little bigger? There's a request in the chat for that. They are kind of small.
I probably
You
made
go.
this too text-based. Just look at the big text. The rest, don't worry
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't worry about reading the rest. I'll actually put the slides in the chat so you can just go ahead and like look at them on your local computer. And that way everybody that wants to look at them locally can. I like to say power should be used to empower rather than overpower. I don't need to hide what I'm sharing with you. I want to share it. So I put the slides in the chat, and I those should be visible now. So next, the like some would argue that the wealth tax by the way, Nadali, if you have a logistical question about the presentation, I'm happy to take that, but we save questions until the end. You are totally welcome to keep your hand up, and you will absolutely be number one when we finish the presentation, which is just a few slides from now. And then you'll be the first one to ask a question or make a comment. But everyone, by popular opinion, asked to hold questions and comments until after the presentations. But Chris interrupted for the logistical reason. So those are what fair game. So um, so the wealth tax might discourage business creation or long-term investment, especially if returns are uncertain and businesses are asset heavy. So I would argue that having a wealth tax actually does the opposite. What it does by having a 10% wealth tax is it says the wealthy need to invest their money into areas with a higher than 10% ROI, which there absolutely are. There are lots of places where you can play with bigger amounts of money where you can get more than a 10% ROI. If you look at pension funds and things like that, they invest in ways insurance companies have a higher than 10% ROI. And then they're investing large amounts of money in ways that gets them a higher return on investment. And so what it really does is it tells the wealthy you have to invest that money into the economy, which will actually stimulate the economy even more by encouraging them to invest so that they make more money rather than parking their money and making the passive investment of 10%. Basically says you can break even if you want passive investment. Otherwise, you need active investment, which means you need to actually look at higher risk opportunities that are going to grow the economy even more because I am a huge believer in the free markets. I think I'm more of a believer in the free markets than conservatives that say that they're free market advocates. If you want to see my belief on the right direction to go in the free markets, you can watch our video in the past on YouTube about generous capitalism. I think that's the future of the free markets. But anyway, I'm digressing again. So governments need resources. Um, Basically, next potential negative is that there's high administration and enforcement costs. Governments need resources, audit capacity, and legal frameworks to properly evaluate and enforce taxes. That can be burdensome. So, absolutely. I think, though, that if we do a tax of 10% over $100 million, we're going to generate so much money that the government will absolutely have the resources to collect on that. The reason that I think so many wealth taxes have failed is they were really low. They were like 1%, so as not to disrupt the elites that are super wealthy and often funding the political campaigns in at least our country. But in other countries, the ultra wealthy still have a huge amount of sway, and no one wants to make them too angry. And so I'm gonna buck that trend and say, I think we should tax much higher. And doing so, I'll also talk about a potential labor pool that could help with this potentially burdensome task, although I think AI could have a big value in helping with it. I'll talk about that a little bit later about where we could get the labor force to enforce this. It could be self-funded labor force. So next is uncertain effectiveness relative to expectations. Several countries that tried wealth taxes later repealed them because they yielded lower results. I kind of covered that already. Um, that's why I think all of the Alliance for to End Unjust Wars have to implement this together. is that you want to avoid avoid the capital flight or capital risk flight. So yes, there are downsides, but I think those downsides are actually overcomable, and you just have to be smart about how to overcome them. And I think that the wealth tax that I'm proposing actually avoids these negatives through collaboration and cooperation, and will actually create a much more prosperous society without harming anyone's well-being or happiness in any way, shape, or form, as I mentioned. Now, that doesn't mean people won't complain, by the way, right? Like people will complain. Does it mean that it actually hurt their day-to-day happiness? No, it doesn't. People complain all the time when their day-to-day happiness isn't hurt. Elon Musk, wealthiest person in the world, moved his operation from California to Texas because he didn't want to pay so much tax and he didn't want the regulations. It's not like he needed to, he just chose to, and he complained not out of necessity or not because it was required, but because he disagreed with it on principle, which is fine. Like we should all be able to advocate for what we believe on principle. So not, but I do think that it's important to realize that not everybody that complains has a valid reason for complaining. That said, let's talk about the diminishing marginal utility of wealth. I already kind of covered that. Um, and social welfare. Yeah, let's skip this because I kind of already covered it. The ethical and utilitarian core of the argument, or what I think is like a post-utilitarian philosophy, is the FTI's six intentions. It's like a riff on utilitarianism that I think is a little bit better. But basically, when someone has that much money, you're not really hurting their happiness by taxing them. But I'm going to talk about the upsides of taxing them because I think that's also important about the amount of public good that can happen. So I already talked about the thresholds. You would basically, the tax would begin at $50 million. Now, at exactly $50 million, you would pay 0% tax. At $100 million, you would pay 10% tax. So at 60 million, you would pay 2% tax, right? So you would pay 2% tax for every $50 million you got, and then it would be gradual. So there's no cliffs that cause this this advantage to make less money, or have less money. And so you would basically have this comprehensive net worth assessment that includes all assets, real estate, investments, business equity. So if you were an owner of a business, you can't hide the tax, you can't hide the wealth in a business. If you own 10% of a $100 million business, that's $10 million of net worth right there. Um, so this would basically say you would subtract out debts and liabilities because that's money that you owe, tangible money that you owe, and that's basically your overall net worth. Now, you would get an annual valuation and filing requirement that would be required, say, at $20 million or some reasonable number that you're well within the range of being able to afford for someone to track your assets. Now, I have uh, let me see. I think I cover this in the next slide. But basically, there's a trick to, well, what if someone and so why is this design fair? I'll cover it may come up in the Q&A if I don't cover it, but how does this help? So it only taxes the ultra wealthy. You don't have $50 million in net worth, no tax. No one gets taxed. You don't have $20 million in net worth, you don't actually have any tax burden. By the way, $20 million in net worth, if you simply parked it the way that I suggested in our savings and investment strategy, which will work for just about anyone, you just park it in the S&P 500 with 20 million in assets, you are making $2 million a year of income on stock. And so you literally can live off of $2 million a year for the rest of your life if you have $20 million in net income. If your net income is in liquid net income, meaning you can buy it in stock, but you could always sell your assets and just buy stock and then live off that. And you could spend $1.5 million and it would go up faster than inflation. So these people are not worried about money in any way, shape, or form. You can live very high on the hog without an issue. So next, it minimizes disincentive effects because it's a linear progression. So again, you don't have that discouraging someone to accumulate more wealth because they only pay a tiny little more tax by accumulating more wealth. Wealth parked idly becomes costly, so now capital gets reinvested. I covered that. maximize social welfare gain per dollar taxed because there's diminishing marginal utility at high wealth levels, meaning people at higher wealth income or wealth levels like don't get much more happiness from their money, and they don't lose much happiness when they lose money, and really they're not losing, they're just breaking even. If they even have half a brain about how to invest their money, you can stay at 10% pretty consistently. You can stay at, what your net worth is very consistently without taking any risk. Now, basically, the challenges and how to mitigate them. I covered the asset inventory over $20 million. I guess I did a lot of this from memory without using my slides. The valuation complexity. So I will say yes, there will be complicate complexity to valuing the net worth of someone, but I will talk about in what is it, two slides? What I think in the next slide about how we can get that labor force, or at least part of that labor force, by moving people up the labor food chain in the government. I'll talk about a way to get a whole lot more government employees for a low cost, and we can move people in the government up the food chain so that we can have both independent third-party appraisers as well as government appraisers and standardized guidelines and regular audits. um, you would have here's a trick that I came up with, because you could say, well, someone could just leave assets off their inventory and then not have to pay tax. I always like to think about the ways to game the system, right? Well, a wealthy person could just say, oh, I'm just going to leave off the $100 million building I have in New York City. Well, here's the trick. If anyone can actually point out that John Doe has $100 million that wasn't included in their inventory, and the inventories can be potentially made public to either a small segment of society that probably it should be public to everybody, to be honest, and your assets get shared, like what your assets are in gets shared. But if someone can say this person left this off of their inventory, then you get that asset. So if Peter says, "Hey, John Doe, you left off that $100 million building," guess what? Peter gets the $100 million building because it was left off the asset tracking sheet. Guess what? Nobody will leave any assets off their asset tracking sheet then. And everybody will be making sure that everybody else is accountable to making sure that all the assets are on their asset tracking sheet. So I think that's a clever way of kind of using the free markets actually to incentivize people to be accountable to properly accounting for their net worth. Now, um, I do think you should allow payment flexibility like installments, because some people have illiquid assets, which means assets that they can't just turn into cash. They may have real estate or business equity, etc. You don't want to force people to do what are called fire sales, where they have to sell at a very cheap price. And so you give people the chance to borrow against those assets and pay it off over time. All about payment plans, that's fine. I just want to make sure things are fair. I don't want to unnecessarily punish anyone. But also, what this would do is it would create a new mindset of the ultra high net worth individual, where they have to keep a certain amount of their assets liquid to pay the wealth tax. And so I think that that won't be a huge issue. It wouldn't be a huge issue. International coordination, I talked about to reduce tax flight, and then transparency and fairness. I really think those valuations should be public, because if someone, for example, undervalues their property, you could, try to, like call someone out for that. And if an independent auditor says, hey, you've valued that at a gross negligence, then there would be some sort of penalty equal to the amount that you undervalued it at, or something like that. Um, Now, no plan is perfect. I think, though, that there are concrete ways to mitigate the biggest risks. And the things that I mentioned, I think, will handle a lot of the biggest risks. But I would love in the Q&A portion, which we're going to get to very shortly, I have two more slides, I think, and then we'll get into the Q&A where people can shoot holes into this theory, or hypothesis, really. It's not a theory yet. It's just a hypothesis, a nascent one, very early stage one. And so I'm very welcome to feedback
Yeah,
and
so
criticism,
what
and
time's the
we'll
next
have
thing at
plenty of
six
that in the
o'clock?
Q&A, I'm sure.
Want me to come up?
And
Dan?
Daniel, I'm going to mute you because I don't think you meant to be off mute. Now, what could we do with this? So this is one slide, but it will, well, okay, no, I'm going to okay, I have a couple more slides. So basically, we can create significant revenue, we can reduce wealth inequality, we can incentivize productive investment, we create greater social cohesion and fairness and financial mobility. I actually think we will stop things like the assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare because that guy was really the assassin. Mario was really angry at the wealth inequality and the way that people that were members of that insurance company were treated. So generous capitalism plus this together would be a way to prevent that type of behavior from happening again. He was just outraged by the lack of fairness, and I think we all inherently in our hearts know what's fair and what's unfair and want what's fair to happen. It's only through misunderstandings that we rationalize and justify unfair behaviors. And part of what the FTI is about is helping us all get closer to truth and fairness. So, that said, I think this would be really good for society in general, not just in the US, but globally. And I do think it's something that should be entered into for the OECD countries at a minimum, and ideally other freestanding democracies. Um, I also will say that let's see, this is all right. Next, I'm going to go into what could we do with the wealth? How much money could we raise with this kind of wealth tax, and what could we do with it? This is the most fun part. So, first of all, a group of, and the, I forget if I put the AI notes in here, but some of the calculations are in the slide notes. So if you were to look at the people, what this tax could raise, basically it could raise between 500 and 750 billion dollars a year. Now, let's say and just to put those numbers, it's a really big number, right? It's really hard to tangibly think about how much money that is and is not. Just to put it into context, in the US, we add about $2 trillion, which is more than double the high end of that to the debt each year. So it's not going to end our debt, but I will go into what it can do. It could give free higher education to all US citizens. This would only cost 30 to 60 billion dollars a year out of the 550 to 900 billion a year that it would raise. Within 5 to 8 years, the tax revenues from doing that, because people are educated higher, they will pay higher tax because they'll make more money. And there are millions of jobs that are unfilled because we don't have enough people with a high enough education in this country to fill them, and we're not letting in enough immigrants to do those jobs. So this will actually increase tax revenues after that, say, first 10 years by about 100 to 200 billion dollars a year after the expense of paying for the free higher ed. So this is actually an ROI of 10 years in the government is really quick. Now that brings us to about a 650 to 1.1 trillion dollar addition to the budget. So there's two ways that I would want to use that. And the second thing I would do starting in year one, every homeless person could be bought a home and for between 75 to 150 billion dollars in one-time expense. Buy them a home, and this isn't going to work for every person. People have pointed that out to me. I know that not every homeless person wants a home, and not every homeless person wants a job. But for everyone that wants a home and wants a job, then give them, a home and a job working for the government, and give them the grunt work or the not difficult work that government employees do so that they can actually have a job. And this was something that was done in the Great Depression. The government started something called the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was actually a really brilliant idea. The government hired people to build trails in nature, for example, or work on public works, construction projects. Almost every park trail that you have ever walked on was created by the Civilian Conservation Corps as a result of the Great Depression. So it was through adversity that I think it was FDR that created this CCC. And it was, I believe, the CCC was actually ended when US aid was closed down. So it lasted a really long time, did a ton of good in the world. And I think that we should do something similar now looking at how we can give more people government employment, that's how we'll deal with the extra bureaucracy. We'll use those new arms of labor and new workforce, train those people so that they can do higher level jobs and have more people in government that can actually enforce this wealth tax, um, ideally using AI as well, so that workforce scales well. And there are probably a whole lot of other public works that could be done with that workforce, if we thought hard about it. Next, we could use $500 billion to $1.5 trillion of that savings, which would get healthcare for all Americans. This would break even in 10 to 20 years. So after 10 to 20 years, we would actually be net equal. And in 20 to 30 years, we would create an additional 280 to $500 billion surplus in the budget after having accounted for the wealth tax. So literally, you could repeal the wealth tax completely after 30 years, and we would be making 280 to $500 billion more than we were doing before. That's a 10 to 25% of the way to ending our deficit and actually starting to pay off the huge amount of debt that America is in right now, which nobody, and I used to look to the conservatives to be the fiscally conservatives that said they wanted to pay off the debt. They are actually creating more debt in my lifetime than the Democrats. And so I don't know who to look to for fiscal conservatism, when it comes to people like me that want to pay off the debt so that we can use that money to reinvest in, the important things that we want to invest in, like infrastructure and soft power and the things that actually give the economy a lot of room to grow. So let's look at that's in the US. Now, if we look at that in a global sense, it could literally create $7.5 trillion of wealth globally per year. That's per year. Huge amount of money that this could raise, and literally no one would be worse off. Yes, you'd be taxing the wealthy, but they wouldn't be any less happy. So why not? Like, what's wrong with that? And with that, I'm going to leave it to questions. Please, when you're raising your hand, and please feel free to raise your hands. You can raise your hands during the presentation too, by the way. Just limit your comment or question to one comment or question at a time. Keep the comment or question to under 2 minutes. And if you want to respond to what someone just asked, feel free to just jump in. I'll let you talk over rather than me. I'm going to be responding to people so that there's a fluid conversation going on, but everybody is allowed to jump in anytime. Like once the person finishes speaking, of course, let them finish speaking. But I'll sort of warn people if they're longer than 2 minutes with the comment or question, and if they're longer than 20 seconds with a retort or a response, or hopefully it's more asking clarifying questions because we want to listen to understand each other. So that said, thank you everyone for your attention, and would love to hear from you.
Thank you. I don't know if you're a communist or something, but I have never heard more ridiculous statements. Just like, seriously, just like
So that
during,
that's an ad hominem. So you can actually, if you have a good reason to not believe what I said, give a logical argument for disagreeing with it. And
I'm giving
instead,
well, I was in the middle of the sentence of
yeah,
doing it.
calling someone a
The logical,
communist is not polite. So that I'm just moderating for politeness.
Garrett, just for the
Yeah.
record, I think it's a compliment.
Hmm. Well, that's not how most
it's a
people see it.
it's a statement of fact, but it never. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have started with that. Anyway, what I was trying to say, just like during abomination, people were very angry that they had to pay for college when somebody else's college will get loans would get annihilated. The same way, if you give homeless free housing, everybody will stop working and will figure out how to be homeless so they can get free housing.
Do you know what kind of housing they would live in? Did you
You,
calculate the amount of money that would go into their house?
you
Because I
haven't.
think if you were to calculate the amount of money that went into their house, you would realize it's only better than it is for someone who's homeless to do that. Literally anyone that's making a normal living would be better off just making a normal living. So this was actually done, by the way, in I think it was Finland or Norway. They basically bought all the homeless one bedroom flats and they solved the homeless problem, and the homeless people started working. And guess what? What you said didn't happen. No one decided to become homeless just to get a house bought.
Um, I guarantee you that's a different society in Sweden than it
Do
is
you want to
here.
bet? Let's make a bet. I'll bet you $10,000 that if this does get
Do you have
implemented in the
ten thousand
US,
dollars?
what's that?
Do you have a $10,000?
Why would I bet you $10,000 if I don't have it?
I don't know.
I'm a high net worth individual according to the standard norm. I'm not at 50 million yet, but I'll get there in my lifetime.
All right. I don't think I'm gonna continue this because I don't think you hear what I'm saying.
What are you trying to say? What am I not hearing?
I'm trying to say that you're being very idealistic and
Yep.
communism never works.
This is
And
not communism.
this is
Nothing that I said is
communism.
communistic. Communism says that the government owns the means of production. That's what socialism says. That's what communism says. Taxing the wealthy is not communism.
Well, you be since you're a high net worth individual, you'll be the first one
I would love
taxed.
to pay this tax along with everybody else.
You can voluntarily pay it. You
Guess
don't
what?
need to
So
get
can
one.
you. But guess what? No one is. So what you have to do is you have to put the tax in place. Again, I think you haven't come up with a logical reason that any of my reasoning was wrong. No high net worth individual will be any less happy by putting this tax in place. There's
I would be
no,
less happy
what's
because
that?
I would be less happy because I don't want the government putting a barrel to my temple to pay for some drug addict to get a one-bedroom apartment for free.
It's not only drug addicts that are homeless. There are plenty of people that are absolutely very good human beings that just got cancer, for example, and we have no health care for them, so they're homeless. And you know what?
They
If you
should
don't
have
have
thought about
compassion
it.
for those people, those of us that have compassion for them will try to advocate for laws to help them be in a better spot. So,
And those are ones who don't will advocate to make sure that the government does not put barrel to our
as
temples to
as you
pay
wish.
to
If
pay for
you
some drug addicts.
If you want, I don't think you were here, M, when and it's interesting that you're just M, but I'm Garrett Lang, and you know who I am and where I live. But you're an anonymous person criticizing.
I
So,
don't know where you are.
well, I said I'm in New Jersey. I guess you came late. So,
Yes, I was late. I'm sorry.
it's okay. You're welcome to be late. It's just that you'll miss stuff. But the long story short is it's nothing to do with communism. Communism is the government owning the means of production and forcing like the amount of products that are built. It's a command and control infrastructure. This is all free markets. More of a free. I guarantee I'm more of a free market advocate than you are, Em. You may
I
not believe
guarantee
that
you
right
that
now,
you're
but I
not, and I have
guarantee
a
you that
proof
I
for
am.
that. I have a proof to that you're not. Have you
What's
ever
that?
heard of a free? I can prove it that you're not. Have you
Why?
ever heard of a Have you ever heard of a free state project?
No,
I'll put a link in it. I'm
go
one of
for
the
it.
founding members.
Great.
Redistribution of wealth is very poisonous to any kind of society.
Well, right now we're redistributing wealth from the poor to the wealthy. It is very harmful to society. I agree with you. But redistributing from the wealthy to the poor in a way that doesn't cause any reduction of happiness on the wealthy, I think is very
But it
healthy for
does cause
society.
reduction of happiness. I would be less happy.
You believe you will, but actually scientifically it's been proven that you wouldn't.
No, that science was false.
Well, you can
People
read the
are very
peer-reviewed
unhappy
article and
when
you can
somebody else
write
controls their money.
you can read a peer-reviewed article and you can write you
I
can
have read a lot of peer review articles that were wrong.
there are peer-reviewed articles that are wrong. So the way to prove them wrong is to write your own peer-reviewed article, perform your own scientific experiment, reproduce that study and prove them wrong.
I have better things to do. I'm sorry.
I know you're just going to disagree. That's okay. Thank you for your time and thank you for your comments. Until the peer-reviewed article comes around, saying that what you say is true, I'm going to believe the peer-reviewed research for now. So, Peter, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you doing? Besides the, well, sorry, I got you sipping tea, whatever that is.
Wine.
Um, oh, okay. So, so I just Googled this, and this is something I thought of a while. China is communist. And there
It
are some
is.
pretty wealthy people in China.
There are.
I'm looking on Forbes ranking, like this Zhang Shanshan. He's involved with, I guess, like bottled water or something like this, but he's worth $77 billion.
Hmm.
You know, so why is it? What is the difference between a wealthy person like that in China versus the U.S.? You know, we're capitalists, they're communists. Like, what are the trade-offs, and why? If
They
it's
aren't. They aren't really
assuming that they're able
communist.
to exist over there,
Yeah, they aren't really communists in China. They call themselves the People's Republic of China, but they're not a republic either. They're also not communist because
yeah,
they use free markets to run their economy. So if they were
yeah,
communist, they would have a centralized production system that's government controlled. They do have a lot of government jobs. 300 million Chinese work for the government the last I checked. That was a couple years ago, but they have a
yeah,
large government, huge government, but they're not communist.
yeah.
They're free market advocates and they're winning in the free markets, quite frankly. They're producing more, like, look at everything you own. Half of it's made in China.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And if
people
you
are
were
now
a billionaire,
complaining,
It's,
Garrett,
people are complaining that the Chinese produce too much. I'm like, if you think they produce too much, produce better stuff at a better cost and compete in the free markets. Don't complain that China's producing too much too effectively.
if they're so good, why everybody from
well,
there moving here, not the other way around?
Well, because nobody likes to be spied on by their government. But ironically, the guy that told us that we were being spied on our government in the US had to flee to Russia. His name is Edward Snowden. We did another event on that. And quite frankly, I actually agreed with the government's reasons for spying at that time. What I didn't agree with was the fact that they treated him so badly as a whistleblower that he had to flee the country, and that all the other whistleblowers with similar news to break ended up being tortured by our government, meaning put into solitary confinement until they turned trans, as one example with Chelsea Manning. So our government is really bad to whistleblowers. But we did another event on whistleblowers for anyone that wants to go to our YouTube.
and I guess what I'm getting at is that if you were a billionaire, Garrett, or probably most people here on this call, you'd probably want to live in the U.S. versus China,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
even though you're allowed to have all this wealth, but if there's a day when the government wants what you have, they're going to come and they're going to take it. And there maybe there's some guardrails, I don't really know, but I think the perception here is that there really are not very many in China. You know,
I agree. And by
it's
the way, Em,
real.
I
You know,
agree completely
they'll
that
use whatever.
I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't mean to talk over you.
That's
But
okay.
I agree with you that people would, and I agree with both of you that people would rather live in the US. And I think that's because we still have a lot of freedom in this country. That may go
Yeah,
away. Like there are active forces trying to take away the freedom that we have in this country. And the people that support those forces don't even realize that that's what they're supporting. But there's very good evidence that's very public and very non-controversial evidence that, Trump and his administration are trying to take away our freedom. And very soon it might be much safer and freer to live in China than it is to live in the US. That's very possible in the next 10 years if we don't do something about what's going on in our country. And quite frankly, the reason I'm having an event next week about listening to understand Trump supporters is because I think Trump supporters have valid reasons to gripe, and I want to hear them out.
yeah,
And so next week is about listening to understand Trump supporters to understand where they're coming from. Because right now I just don't get it. And I don't mean to digress on that because tonight is about the wealth tax. So, but I'm very excited about next week. I'm hoping to learn a lot from it. So
yeah. If I can kind of just ask,
please.
yeah, at least, what I'm trying to drive at, I guess, is there's kind of pros and cons to China's system and our system. China, one thing they do, from what I understand, is they aggressively tariff so they can protect. Well, they have a history of stealing information and then using that in their technology and then building so they can make the best product they can. And then they aggressively tariff so they can sell that. And there's pros and cons to everything. So, why is it worth
I'm
taxing, and
sorry,
is it worth for rich
what's the
people to
pros in
pay?
China?
Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt, but what's the pros in China? Because I don't know a single one.
So, mhm. so I think I can explain this, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Go
So,
ahead.
so some of the stuff they do, and this is obviously wrong, I think you'll agree, is that they've had a history of stealing intellectual property from other companies in other countries. And right now with semiconductors, China is at, if you don't know, Taiwan Semiconductor Company is like the giant semiconductor company. So China would like to steal their shit, and they'd like to make their stuff, and then eventually, if you're not aware, they would like to take over Taiwan again, and they'd like to take it back into the fold, right? But they're forced to work with them, and they're actually forced to buy from them because their product is so superior. But one thing that China does is they will find people like that in companies, and they'll steal their stuff, and then they'll build things, and then they'll aggressively tariff anything coming in so that they can build up their own homegrown industry. So imagine you have a couple factories in your city and you have a ton of jobs because you're selling a bunch of shit going overseas because your government has set up this system. And you're probably going to be fairly happy. At least, people in the Rust Belt here would be happy if they had a couple of those, that setup going on. So they do create systems that benefit their citizens. It's
Yeah.
just at the cost of arguably kind of a free market of, I guess, good faith ideas, or there's a better word for it, but they're stealing
Yeah.
shit. They're,
Well,
they're stealing
basically,
shit,
Peter,
and then
they
they're
don't they
using
don't
that.
respect IP rights, to your point. And so if
Yeah,
you only care about execution and not about IP rights, then
yeah,
like China's a great place to do business because you can steal from everyone, implement it, and make a ton of
yes,
money. And you only have to sell to the Chinese market because it's huge. It's 300 and something billion people, or it's a
yeah,
billion people. And so the other thing, that's good about China is that the government aggressively invests in private enterprise. And if you have government connections, you're going to get in on those deals. If you're good at politics and you're good at kissing the right butts, you will get in on those deals and you'll build large, successful businesses and communities with government support and backing. They have done a huge amount in renewable energies. They build the cheapest, most effective for the cost solar panels in the world because the government invested huge amounts of money in solar panel research while our government was sitting on their butt and not investing anything in solar panel research. And let's face it, fossil fuels are going to run out in the next 70 years, according to the fossil fuel companies, within the next 100 years, nearly guaranteed. So renewables are the only choice we're going to have eventually. And yet we're not in that game. We're still in the AI game, but that's another story. Um,
So are
yeah.
you proselytizing theft? Is that what you're doing?
I am sharing truths. Now, Em, I still agree with you. I don't want to live in China. I don't want to be spied on by the government. I don't want government censorship, and I don't use Chinese models because they censor. And I want free speech. I'm a huge advocate of free speech, which is why we welcome debate here. That's why I want your opinions, Em. Like, I want to hear what you disagree with about what I said. I'm not
I
trying to
haven't
shut you
heard
down.
anything.
Go
I
ahead.
haven't heard a single sentence that I agree with.
That's okay. I want to hear that. I want to hear where you disagree with me and why. I don't care if you agree with me or disagree with
Because
me.
I don't want anybody, because I don't believe in any kind of redistribution of wealth.
Well, if you support the Trump administration, you do.
Yes, I
Because,
do.
yeah, so Trump is redistributing wealth. He's
No,
taking
he's
it from the
not.
poor and giving it to the wealthy.
He's not taking anything from anybody.
Absolutely is. Come to go look at our event on the Big Ugly Bill, and you'll see that exactly that
That
is what's
big
happening. He's
ugly bill
redistributing
made me
wealth.
free.
What's that?
That big ugly bill made me free.
Okay. I don't know what you mean by made you free. Were you enslaved before? What do you mean by made you free?
It took off the threat of prosecution
Of what?
of software development.
Prosecution of software development?
Hmm.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know if you noticed, but for the last at least 5 years, if not longer, for as long as Gary Gensler was ahead of SEC Commission, they were prosecuting all of the blockchain companies for just writing the code. The big ugly bill, as you call it, made us all free. We're not under threat of prosecution anymore.
Can you put a link in the chat for that? Because I'm not familiar with that. I know a lot of people in that space, and I have not heard that anyone is getting prosecuted for, you know,
SEC
Bitcoin.
prosecutions? Yeah, I can put a list on. There's tons of companies that got prosecuted.
Okay. If they were prosecuted, and then cite for me the sources of where they got prosecuted and
They got
what.
prosecuted by SEC.
Yeah, so just put an example in the chat.
There's tons.
Just one, the best one, the most solid one you can. And then let's talk about it in Discord after tonight, after when I can research it. Join us in Discord. I would love to chat with you there. I'm gonna put the link for all of our links in the FTI are in this document right there. So Discord, and if you go to the website, Discord is prominently displayed. But let's go to the next person. So really good comments and additions, Peter. Thank you. Zen, how are you?
Good. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm following this correctly, so
Go
correct me
ahead,
where I'm wrong.
please.
Um, First of all, I'm not sure if when this tax kicks in, this wealth tax kicks in,
$50 million
is
of net worth,
okay, so is the first 50 million off the
not
books
taxed
if
at
it
all.
goes over?
Yeah,
Right.
not taxed at all.
For anyone. Okay.
Yeah, at 50 million, you're not taxed at all. At a little over 50 million, you start to pay a minuscule amount of tax.
But you write off that 50 million and it's just on the additional income or the
Well,
additional wealth.
I didn't get to that. I think that the tax starts infinitesimally small, but if you're at, I don't know which way I calculated it, to be honest. I would have to check.
Yeah, but
I don't,
Gary, you only want to tax over 50 million,
I
right?
understand what you're saying,
Yeah, you don't
but
at 51 million, you don't want to be
yeah, I
taxing
think I did
50
it so there
million.
are no cliffs, so it's only taxed over 50 million. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah, that's the way they did Prop 63 in
Yeah.
California. Millionaires or the millionaires tax to support mental health services.
Yeah, I'm like
Um,
80% sure that's right.
yeah, okay.
That's how it should
Um,
be done.
my other question was, this is a 10% tax, correct?
Over $100 million, it's 10%. At $60 million, it's 2%. At $50 million, it's 0%.
Okay. So at 10%, if you're taxed for 10 years, that would be like 100% of whatever it was.
No, no, that's not how it works.
Okay.
You would invest your money in the S&P 500 at $100 million. You're basically making back your money on the tax. Like people with
Well,
$100 million
that
of
would
wealth
work if it
don't.
was cash, but if it was a $10 million painting, that
No one puts their, I mean, no one parks their money with $100 million into a non, well, I don't want to say that because people buy depreciating assets like yachts and stuff like that. This would actually discourage spending on non-appreciating assets because when you spend money on depreciating assets, you get taxed on them too. And so it actually encourages spending on, I didn't even think about that. So I'm glad you're asking, Zen. Like this actually encourages spending on things that will increase in value for the whole economy, which actually helps everybody. And it discourages spending on things like yachts because if you have a mega yacht, you're paying tax on it every year and you don't get any return back. And wealthy people know that's not a good investment.
okay.
Any other questions, Jan? Zen?
That'll do me. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Fred, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for another well-researched and thoughtful presentation again.
Thank you
And
for your kind
as
words.
you know, I'm sure that you know that the main difficulty here is in the implementation, which can be very tricky.
Hmm.
Uh,
I think
this,
getting the consensus is the hardest part, Fred. The implementation would be easy compared to getting everyone to agree with it.
well, I don't know.
No?
The majority of French voters have agreed with it. There's a consensus there for
Well, I think they had
30,
a
40
1%.
years, and it's been an abysmal failure there.
I think the French had a 1% wealth tax. So that was an abysmal failure because it cost just as much to collect it as they collected. So it wasn't really helpful.
Well, actually, the problem there was that it's inherent to the to a wealth tax, and that is that the difficulties of enforcing it are, are very difficult to overcome. So there is, for example, an article I read in a tax revenue journal in French, in an academic peer-reviewed tax policy journal, one among quite a few articles on one of several of France's attempts to increase the wealth, to create a wealth tax. And inevitably it gets repealed because it just simply flat out fails. That rich people leave. And I know you have a sort of a solution to that, but there will be always be countries like, say, Switzerland, which is not part of the EU, which is not part of NATO. So it might be, and as you know, Switzerland is one of the world's premier wealth investment countries for that reason. They have a sound economy, and they're not as subject to the various tax schemes of other countries as much as other European countries. There will always be countries like that. Britain's another example, if we're talking about EU. In this, but in this article, it said that that indeed the wealth tax that this economist studied raised 3.5 billion euros, but the net loss in revenues to the country was €7. In other words, roughly twice what the revenue generated was. And there are all sorts of ways the tax was lost. In productivity, in flight, there were roughly 15, 20,000 rich people who left, some very prominent ones. For example, the actor Gerard Depardieu. So there are a number of implementation problems with this, and European countries try this from time to time, and they don't have very good success in it. It would be a tough sell to say to have a tax proposal where you say, well, I know this has failed in the past, but it's failed because you didn't go big. So the reason that this proposal has failed again and again is because you didn't do it big enough. That's a hard sell. That's like saying, well, I know my investment has failed 6 times over the last 10 years, but that's because you didn't invest enough. It's
No,
just
why do you think
hard
that?
to
So
sell.
why
Thanks.
do you think that? Because if the reason that the reason that it failed was because of flights, like flight risk, like people leaving the country, if all like safe countries were agreed on this wealth tax, where would you go? Would you really go to Somalia with like $100 billion in Somalia? Like
No, I
you'd
go
get
to
killed
Switzerland,
instantly.
like I said. So how would you force
I
countries
wouldn't
around the
force,
world to
I would
agree?
entice. And what I just described is that we could get Americans, every homeless person, to be able to have the choice to have a house and a job. I got every American free health care for higher ed. I got every American health care. That's a lot of people that get a lot of benefits, and they do it in a way that is net profitable for our country. So if you're an economic conservative and you want to grow the economy, all three of those things are smart things to do because people that are poor and homeless, they don't pay taxes. When they have a job, they're paying taxes. When you talk about the education, I discussed the education and healthcare. All of those are net tax positive. So if you want to collect more money in tax, you should do all of those things, and you're doing it in a way that doesn't decrease anyone's happiness globally. Why would
Well,
countries not want to
even
buy into that if they could do the same for their country?
even though the well-established record is that it actually causes a net revenue outflow, not
But you
inflow.
have to look at the reasons it caused the net revenue outflow. And if you look at those reasons and those reasons are addressed, then you have to say, well, if I invested in, something that had a good reason for failing, and I have another investment that doesn't have that reason for failing, but still has the same promise, do you invest in the second investment, or do you say, you know what, I lost once, I'm never going to bet on that again? Or do you say, you know what, these second guys have thought about the problem that the first guys faced, but it's a very promising industry. I'm going to bet on the second guys because I believe in that industry, and these guys have solved the problem. Which one do you do? Now, I would bet on the second guys if there are no foreseeable problems to their solution. Now, if there are foreseeable problems, then you either mitigate it or you skip.
I, well, that's a great leap of faith. I would suggest that as long as uh, Goldman Sachs tax attorneys earn 10 to 100 times federal tax enforcers, then Goldman Sachs advisors will find a way to shelter the money.
Disagree, but that's okay. We don't have to agree on that. Just because someone is highly paid doesn't mean they're highly intelligent.
Oh, well, all I always do is look at the record, shelters. I look at
That's because government is ineffective. Government is
offshore
ineffective.
look at offshore reinsurance. They're just 1,001 schemes, which we can't even imagine, but they are highly paid to do that. And we just have to look at the record over the last 40 years, all the different tax schemes and all the different avoidance schemes.
So you're saying
it's just
because
a
people
real
get to,
uphill battle.
so you're saying because people have avoided tax successfully in the past, there's no way to help hold them accountable to tax?
No, what I'm suggesting is that it's an abysmal failure. I mean, look at the record. I posted
So you're saying
sample
collecting
article.
tax is an abysmal failure, so we shouldn't bother taxing?
No, that's not at all what I said. I
Okay,
said
then what
that
are you saying?
the wealth tax is an abysmal failure.
But it
And I would
hasn't been
offer
tried
that,
in the way that I proposed. So the way that I proposed, I believe, addresses all the concerns you mentioned. You said there are many, many reasons that it failed, but you didn't mention any of the reasons that I didn't already address. So if there are big reasons that you think it would fail that I didn't already address, let me know what they are. I'm open to feedback. Like
I
maybe I need to
did.
address them.
I did. You said, I did. For example, you said, well, I don't know. If the idea is that I don't know, the UN, I guess, would enforce your particular notion of wealth tax on every country in the world, I don't get that proposal. If
No one would
you do,
impose it on anyone.
you
It would be self-selected by members of the free world because they would say this is a fair thing to do. And by being a fair thing to do, that helps our country make more money because every one of these countries, every country that opts in could find ways to spend that money in a way that has a net positive impact on government revenues, just like we can. It's not that hard. You just have to get the
what
right people in the right places to make those decisions, and you can have a net positive revenue impact on every one of those countries. And why would a country not say, I'm going to tax people who where it doesn't cause them any harm? We're all going to opt into this tax at the same time, so no one can escape it unless they want to go to Somalia or countries that are not free. Why? Help me understand the downside. Like, what? How do you avoid it?
I already went through that, but apparently we're going to disagree on that. I think we just should look first at the
What's the
historical,
thing that you said that
because this is,
didn't hit on the
I
things that I
I
already
can't
addressed?
respond if you interrupt me every minute. So let's just agree to disagree. I would suggest people look at the academic and historic record, or just simple common sense before they dive into yet another failed tax scheme. Thanks.
Well, I'm not presenting right now to the United Nations, so maybe I'll do that at some point, but not there yet. But if you had anything that you said that I didn't already address, I didn't hear it. So just tell me what it is. Name
Well, I
one.
did, but you keep interrupting me. So,
Go ahead.
and you block me at every
I'm not
step. So
blocking you. You're
I
repeating
won't
the
repeat
same
it.
thing
I
over and
won't
over
repeat it
again, Fred.
again. I guess I won't repeat it again. Thanks. Thanks anyway.
You're
I
repeating the
appreciate your
same thing over and over again,
I
Fred. Tell me
appreciate your
what the
quixotic
thing is that I didn't
idealism,
address.
and I don't interrupted when I'm talking, trying to respond to your question. So apparently this isn't going anywhere. So,
Go ahead.
but I appreciate your quixotic idealism. And I
Go
agree that
ahead. I'm not going to interrupt you. I'll mute myself.
No, that's fine. This will go nowhere. People will believe what they will. And I would say that if you did give a presentation through the United Nations to every individual in the world, and they all unanimously agreed that you have a terrific idea, then it might be worthwhile. But failing that, sorry, I guess I'm just cynical. I don't see it happening because the historical record doesn't bear it out. Thanks. That's it. Bye.
Okay, I let you talk, but I didn't hear a reason that I was wrong. I just
Yeah,
heard
well,
you say that you need
you should listen harder.
unanimous. Now you're interrupting me. I heard that you said if I don't get unanimous agreement from everybody on Earth, that my idea is bad. That's what I heard.
Well, all right. So how again would you get Switzerland to go along with your tax?
They're going to make more money and they're not going to cause any reduction in happiness to anyone in their whole community. And they're going to make more money as a government. And they're going to make that money in a way that will, positively impact society, invest in infrastructure, etc.
Uh-huh. Well, good luck with that. Thanks. Bye.
No problem. Thanks, Fred.
Can I just
Appreciate your thoughts. Neil, go
can
ahead.
I just
We have a
quickly
lot of
point
hands
out
up.
that
Yeah,
just to
go ahead,
Fred
DLJ.
quickly, just quickly to Fred, Switzerland does already have a wealth tax. It's
Hmm.
very interesting.
Thanks
Yes,
for
Europe has several countries with wealth taxes, and they don't work very well.
Well, Switzerland hasn't repealed theirs. Thanks, DLJ, for the fact checking. Um, Neil, how are you?
I'm doing good. I just want to see if I understand the math here, because in my head, the math isn't mathing. So for the hypothetical example of somebody with 100 million net worth, they've got to pay 10% tax. Um, if that 100 million, like you said, was entirely in a mutual fund, then yeah, it's liquid. You sell off 10%. There's your tax. I understand that. But if your entire net worth is 100 million, you're not having 100 million in the mutual fund because your 100 million is in real estate and your business and all other stuff. So even if you had 10% of your investment in a mutual fund and the rest of it was in real estate and business valuations, you'd have to sell all of your mutual fund to pay that 10% tax. So I guess I'm struggling to
No,
find
no, because
how it
remember,
works.
only over 50 million is taxed, and it's a gradual
Oh,
tax.
okay.
So yeah, it's everything under 50 million, there's no tax. So you
Okay,
have
so it's
50
not
million tax
10%
free.
of the 100 million, it's 10%
Yeah,
of
everything over
the
100 million is taxed over at 10%. So it's only the super high amount of money that's taxed. And so theoretically, like as if this were to pass, right, high net worth individuals would simply manage their resources so that they're getting a return on investment that allows them to have enough liquid net worth that they can pay that tax every year.
All right. I guess I have to work out the math a little bit, but I do see
Yep.
what you're
I see
saying
why
that
your math
that
wasn't mathing. It's
it
okay.
the
You're
10%
right.
isn't 10% of your entire net worth. It's
Correct.
10% of the top part of that net worth, which
Right.
is just a fraction, unless you're like a billion. If your net worth is a billion, then
It's an
mathematically it's
effective
still
tax rate of
closer.
10%.
It's closer. Yeah, at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah, but I kind of am
Okay.
okay giving an effective tax rate of 10% on someone that has $1 billion.
Yeah. I guess like you said, it does mean that that $1 billion can't just be entirely static because
Correct.
otherwise your net worth would be going down by 10% each year. Your
Right.
100 billion would be 90 billion very quickly in one
Right.
year. You have
Which
to
is
be
good.
investing in.
Which is good
Yeah.
because what that says is that high net worth individuals have to invest their money in the economy, in things that will create a high return on investment, which is actually a free market solution. That's basically saying we want the free markets to work for society. We don't want that money to just get parked for dynastic wealth to keep 100 generations of a family to never have to work again. Is that fair? Is it fair that Elon
Yeah.
Musk's next 100 generations don't have to work another day in their lives? That's not fair. That comes into death tax, which we could talk about another night, which I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of.
Yeah. It just seems it just seems like people would want to hide their value
Of
in
course.
certain ways,
Of course. So you would need to
because
be clever about the way you implement it, which is what I said is if you're hiding your net worth, you lose the asset. If you don't declare the asset, you lose the
well, maybe
asset as soon as
hiding
someone
isn't the
points
right
it out.
word. Like if I have 10 children and I give $1 million to each of my 10 children, their net worth went up, but it's still under the limit of the threshold, and my net worth went
No,
down.
it's
So
not.
now I'm
That's
taxed
higher than the
less.
gift tax, so you have to pay gift tax to your children, which is fine. Then you pay gift
Yeah.
tax. But
But
anything over, I think it's
you see what I'm getting at. It's
$25,000
like,
is the gift tax.
yeah. So, but there are ways that you basically give out your wealth to the people who are not at that limit, so they don't have to pay it, and
Great.
then you're not having that. You see what I'm saying?
Great. Then that's fine. Like if you want to give wealth to other people so that they get, rise up in the economics, that's fine. Like I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that just gives more people an opportunity to do good in the world. And I would argue it's a very small minority that want to be that really greedy elite that doesn't want to share their wealth. A lot of us say, look, I want to share my wealth, and I do, right? I hire people, I help, give money to good causes. I donate my time every week to do presentations like this. Like I'm trying to do good in the world, right? And I think most people want to do good in the world. We have to facilitate that and we have to reward that, not punish it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Bill and Melinda Gates, for example. They
Yeah.
seem to be giving away an awful lot of, money and good stuff that they're doing.
Yep.
Not
Especially
just,
Melinda. She gives away even more than Bill, and
oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Internationally, they're doing fabulous work.
Bill Gates, used to be very greedy, quite frankly, when he was younger, and then he met Warren Buffett, who got him to be more generous. Bill
There
Gates
you
got a
go.
lot of flack back in the day for not donating anything to anyone, but now he's really seen the other side. The guy eliminated polio in Africa single-handedly. Not single-handedly, right? He had a team, but his financing eliminated polio
Right.
in the continent of Africa. That's
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
impressive.
Right. I mean, I've seen a 1 hour show that Dave Letterman did with Melinda and Bill. It was very informative.
Cool.
Have you seen that? Yeah.
I didn't,
Yeah.
but I want to get to more hands. Chris.
Okay. Sorry for interruption,
No,
but I
you weren't
just wanted
interrupting, Jenny. That's exactly what we
okay.
want. I want more people to join in. So please, all feel free to join in. We like your input.
So yeah, I guess where I would start, Garrett, I think it's a good presentation is, in my mind, and maybe not everybody would agree, I think we all need to agree that something needs to be done about wealth inequality in America and probably the world, right? We've seen since the 1980s increasing wealth inequality with the 1% taking like, I think maybe 50 to 70 trillion has shifted from the bottom 90% to the top 1% in wealth. Part of that is, policies regarding unions and a lot of things. It's also just a capitalist system, right? The board of directors is charged with maximizing shareholder wealth, right? So their goal is charge as much as possible for the product, pay the people as little as possible. We got to figure out how to do that, right? So that's what they're up to. So that doesn't help the people who work for these corporations that much when the goal of the management is pay you as little as possible, right? Obviously, they have to compete for talent in the market, but anyway, I think something has to be done about it. I think the fact that the marginal income tax rate has come down since after World War II. The 50s were a great time, highest marginal income tax rates that we've had, but it didn't seem to stop growth. It actually created a middle class. That's what we're losing now. It's causing all the political upheaval, is the loss of a middle class when so many people are struggling. They can hear the populist argument, blame the other side, but anyway, obviously all tax schemes are complicated, very hard to deal with. I would disagree that it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to be complicated. You're going to have the smartest people in the world finding loopholes, and you're going to need smart people on the other side closing the loopholes. But we got to find some way to deal with wealth inequality. Income inequality is one way, but right now that hasn't worked, and now you have the wealth inequality problem as a result. I think this is as good a way as any. I think you probably have to look at inheritance taxes. We probably have to look at income tax, marginal rates. I think what will happen is now people will be like, hey, I could make more money for myself, or maybe I could lower prices or pay people more. Right. I think that's going to start to become a thought process versus let me charge higher prices and pay people less because then, I can buy the yacht. Right. Maybe they're thinking, screw the yacht,
Try to finish your
because
thought.
I got to, but anyway, I think it'll be hard to do, but I think it's the kind of thing that we have to figure out how to do. So that's
Yeah.
where I am. But
I agree with you that we have to address income inequality. And the reason that I'll say that it's super important is we're starting to see people literally kill wealthy people because they are so horrified by the gross injustice of economic disparity. And that's not good. The way to deal with that is not to put an iron hammer down, it's to say maybe we're doing something unfair in the first place. So why don't we, and I actually will disagree, I agree with you on that, Chris, but I'll disagree that capitalism is inherently greedy. I would argue what we're in today is greedy capitalism, but it doesn't have to be that way. And what I advocate for is what I call generous capitalism, which is where the company gives more to a better deal to the consumer and the suppliers and the employees, pays most of the profit to the employees, and then only after that gives to the community in terms of additional income. And only after that does the company take profits. So if we created companies that are generous capitalist companies and we compete against in the free markets against greedy capitalist businesses, I've asked hundreds of people, would you rather do business with a greedy company or a generous one? And not one person has said the greedy one yet. And I'm curious if Nikki, Fred, et cetera, if any of you would say, I'm going to do business with the greedy company, would you? Or would you actually do business with a company giving you a better product at a lower cost? The free markets actually favor generous capitalism. Does that make sense, Chris?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's we've got to find some way to solve the problem. And just one other thing, just a small little tactical thing. I don't know if folks know what stepped up cost basis is, but basically, if you own an asset that's appreciated and at your time of death, you pass it to your kids, maybe you bought that, whatever, at 1,000, now it's worth 2,000. That $1,000 gain never gets taxed. So it's just another one of these deals where, you could argue that what we have here in America is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the rest.
Exactly. Which
But
is why I
whenever
said
you
that
try
Trump
to
is
address that inequality, the right wing just yells socialism, communism,
right.
Marxism.
All while
People are
taking
afraid
from
of
the
these
poor to give
things.
to the
And so
wealthy.
they, even though it's bullshit, a lot of people listen to it.
Yeah, all while taking from the poor to give to the wealthy, which is an economic distribution of wealth. It's just a distribution of wealth from the people who actually need it to the people who don't need any more, and it won't make any happier. It's like, being
Right.
in a desert with like a boatload of water, seeing a bunch of people dying of thirst around you and being like, you know what? Not my problem. I'm gonna keep drinking, 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 and drinking like so much water that you get sick, and then you end up dying too. Or one of those people dying of thirst decides to kill you and steal your water, which is what would happen when the wealthy go to Somalia to try to protect their wealth from the wealth tax. So, Tanisha, how are you?
Hey, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so I wanted to ask first, so you were saying that like it kind of getting universal, well, close to universal buy-in by most countries, right?
Right,
In regards
right.
to
Getting near that.
near that, right?
Yeah.
My thing is that like let's take your average wealthy person. They like to kind of distribute their funds in different countries.
Oh, you can
So
get
then
around that.
I'm
You're,
just kind of curious on like not
yeah.
necessarily that we can't get around it, is that then which country gets claim of that money, knowing that let's say they're located, maybe their main location is United States, but they got stuff in the Caymans and some stuff in Ireland. So does Ireland get what they have in that spot, or does it like how would you work with this international thing, knowing that like
Great
each country is
question.
going to be want their piece of the pie, knowing that they put that money there.
I love that question, Tanisha. What I would say is that wherever the capital is parked, that's who should get the tax. And so there's no advantage to parking it in an offshore country because if they all have the same wealth tax, you get no advantage to parking it offshore. So people won't bother doing that. They'll just keep it wherever they are because why bother parking it offshore if it doesn't benefit you?
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that was one of the questions I had. And then actually a little kind of tidbit I wanted to let people know. So they've actually done the research on what happens if they just give like homeless and people in poverty homes and a little bit of cash. They found I think it's like Canada, United States, there's been a few European countries that have done it too. And they found that somewhere, depending on the country, it's between 70 to 90% of them get out of poverty. They don't revert back. So the success rate is actually kind of worth giving the money to the homeless because then they do end up, there's a larger amount at, on the low end, 70% that will contribute and that would kind of outbalance it. Now,
Yeah.
obviously there's that, depending on which country you're looking at, there's that 30 to 10% that may not, but that might be an additional problem to address, whether it's mental issues, whether it's
Mhm.
stress issues and so forth, because it's usually in most cases, it's not very cut and dry why they fail, but there are at least a huge number that make up for it. So
Yeah.
little
That's a
thing that
great
like,
point.
people don't consider is that the like homeless people just won't do anything. No, actually, once they're out, they kind of want to grow.
Thank you, Tanisha, for that fact check. I appreciate it. I didn't have that fact at the ready. That was my gut, but I didn't know it. So I appreciate you sharing. If you have a source for that, Tanisha, please put it in the chat so that people who are skeptical can see your source.
Oh yeah.
That would be great. Um, leave it. Um, the other thing about that is I think that we're going to do another event on why the social sciences I think are more needed right now than the hard sciences, even though we keep investing in the hard sciences. And part of what we need to learn is out of that, at the high end, 30% of homeless people that can't, can't get out of being homeless, what are we missing in explaining to them how much better of a life they could have if they simply decided to work hard and give themselves a better life and think about how much happier they would be? What are we missing? Because the incentives are all there to have a better life. So I think that we need to be investing money in that rather than in, bigger bombs and more weapons and more war. So thank
Living
you.
wage is necessary. As a former homeless person, living wage is what's necessary.
Thank you, son. I appreciate that, and I agree with you. I think a living wage is important, but I think a living wage should come to people who are working. I don't think a living wage should be given to someone for not working. I think everybody should have to work. Like, I really do think if they're capable of work, they should have to work. I don't care what they do, but they should have to do something that adds economic value to society so that they have the self-worth to feel like I'm contributing to society. I'm not a believer in handouts. I don't like handouts. I don't think that it's good for society. I don't think it's good for the self-worth of the people getting handouts, right? Like they may want to do it, but there should be a penalty for sitting at home. I don't think people should starve to death in the free world either, but they shouldn't be living high on the hog. So, thank you, Tanisha. Jennifer.
Okay, so I like what Gary is proposing. I like it a lot because it seems like greed has been rewarded now in my lifetime. I'm 70, so in the 50s we had essentially like the highest tax rate was 90%. People were just paying it. It just needs to be fair. And we have for the past, I don't know, 40, 50 years been taking from the poor and giving to the wealthy. And greed has been rewarded, not, patriotism or good citizenship has not been rewarded. So yeah, I just think that it needs to be fair. And I wanted to ask Garrett, well, about China, because I mean, it does seem like the state controls the means of production. I don't know. There might be like these, I don't know, technical things that I don't understand, but they bet on businesses. They decide what should be made, what shouldn't be made, how
Yeah,
cost and all that.
that's a great
And
point, Jennifer.
there's only one party It's
Hmm.
not like, there's fair elections.
Nope, there's no elections. They don't need elections because they know who's going to win. So it's the party, the only party that's legally allowed to exist. So they do the government does pull the levers, but when I say that they don't own the means of production, I mean there's private ownership of most enterprises that add economic value in society. So private individuals own it. Now, those private individuals are often crony capitalists that are friends of government entities, and so there's a lot of corruption that goes on. And that's why they need to censor everybody. They need to monitor everybody to see who, knows about the government corruption. And when it happens, and this happens in, I have a team member in the Philippines. It's happening in the Philippines right now where the government, or not right now, but it was happening recently where the government was giving huge contracts to people who are friends of the government. And the kids of those families were living, a lavish life while other people lived without power, without, all this, without basic needs.
Mhm.
And
So disgusting.
exactly, it's horrible. And we should all be, offended by the fact of this level of injustice. And I'm concerned that people are getting apathetic that they just go, this is just how it is. This is not how it has to be. And one of the first action-oriented intention of the Free Thinker Institute is that we should prevent significant unnecessary harm from happening to all human beings, full stop. And if we could simply agree that that is an agreeable ethical rule that we should all follow, think about how much happier the world would be. And then after that is to increase happiness and decrease harm in the world. If we could just agree on that, like, we would all be way better off.
Thank you.
Thank you, DLJ, for the fact check about China having other political parties. There are
Well,
probably other
because they have
political,
any power.
they have no power. So
And also,
I was in
people,
effect correct, but I was technically wrong, and I appreciate him
Mhm.
pointing out that I was technically wrong. DLJ is good about that, and I want fact checkers. Like I
Well,
don't have to be right about everything.
maybe that's set up just to, you know, mm, fool people too. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I'm
And
sure you're
they
right.
have,
It's to make people feel like there's a choice when really there's no choice.
and they
And
have,
people know that.
mhm. They have private corporations, like you said, but the government, if they decide they don't like that corporation for some reason, they can take it,
Yes, and
or
I've heard
they can
examples in
control
Russia.
it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they can control how they run, how they operate.
Right. And I've heard
Just
examples of Russia in Russia of people who own large businesses that were very successful, and the government came to them and said,
yeah,
"We're going to buy your company for this price." And they said, "No, I don't want to sell." And they said, "I don't think you understand. We're going to buy the company at this price." And it happened to multiple people, and the ones that stood firm and said no ended up in jail, and the government got their company anyway.
yep, or fell out a window.
Or exactly.
Mhm.
That's the worst case scenario.
Yep.
So,
And we have people, we have the wealthiest of the wealthy buying, Congress and
yes.
writing laws and
We've legalized corruption in this country,
totally, yeah,
and that's why, I say we do have a redistribution of wealth in the last 40
yep,
years. It's been taking from the poor and giving to the wealthy, which is, I think, the wrong direction when our socioeconomic disparity is widening. We should all be outraged by that. And we shouldn't be complacent about it. We should be outraged all the time about it, not emotionally, but logically, because we should feel the outrage, but then we need to calm down and think, what can I do about that? What can I do? And if you shop with local businesses and not mega corporations that are beholden to, government lobbying, you're helping the economy, right? Shopping local is a good way to help small to mid-sized businesses, which puts money in the pockets of the average everyday person that's not ultra wealthy. Um, that said, I also want to say you're right that in the 50s the tax rate was in the 90 something percent. The effective tax rate was 50 something percent. And today, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says the effective tax rate should be 50 something percent, she's called a radical liberal when that was the tax rate under Eisenhower, who was a Republican. So that tells you how far to the right dialogue has shifted in our politics, that what was once a Republican policy is now considered radical left. That's
yeah,
nonsense. We need to
yeah,
right this ship now. We need to
right,
say this is not real. This is not reality. This is not radical left. This is a fair tax rate. you're making, over $1 million a year, a dollar goes to the government, a dollar goes to you. You're still making a ton of money and you're making it because of the infrastructure that the government invested to
Yep,
let your company be successful.
yep. And there are groups of wealthy people who, they want to pay more tax. They want to pay a
Yeah.
fair tax, not that they
And
want
I'm
more.
one of them, right?
And
I want to pay more tax,
yeah,
but then you have people who say, well, then why don't you volunteer? But the problem is you don't have an economic
no,
impact if only the ones that will volunteer pay it. So you
right,
have to do it with everybody at the same time. Just like with the wealth tax, if you don't have all the countries agree, yeah, people are going to flee and it's not going to have the economic value that it was supposed to have. And it becomes self-defeating.
right. But in the meantime, we could make our tax system more fair, our
We
tax
could. And that's
code.
where I think we should talk about income tax and how to avoid the high net income or highly paid Goldman Sachs
Yeah.
tax advisors. I would like to try to counter their strategies. I don't
Mhm.
know them all, but I at least know one, and I can counter that one very easily. So, but if other people know other ones, I would love to collaborate with someone on that event. So if anyone wants to do research on all the ways to avoid tax for high net worth individuals, I would love to shoot them down one at a time. So that said, Peter, are you going to be offended if I go to
I just
Nikki
want to say
before
one
you?
more
Go ahead.
thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Um, that if you would like
No,
to
you're
run
good.
for office, I would work on your campaign.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Ginny keeps telling me to run for president. I'm like, oh no, I go the way of JFK right now. So, and I don't have the grassroots support for anything like that. But I would love to talk to people that are in the political know, and I would love to encourage people who want to run for politics to join the FTI. And I would love to be supportive and helpful of them. But I'm probably not going to run for politics myself.
Well,
Um,
I don't change my mind on that, Garrett.
Thank you, Ginny. You're very kind. Um, so, Peter, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to Nikki because I really would like to hear from her. And she and Anisha haven't spoken yet,
Mhm.
so I want to go to them, and then Sarah, and then I'll definitely, I'll try to make sure we get to you, even if it's quick, Peter.
Okay, so I have to say the reason why I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead,
It's because
Nikki.
I thought your ideas were wonderful, and I do agree with you on a lot of things. But I think we're coming at it at a different approach. I'm anti-government because I'll tell you one thing, if you want a little piece of history, the Federal Reserve is as federal as the Federal Express, okay? It's a private organization. The tax money doesn't go where you think it is. I'm not going to go into it, but you've got to do your research. So I don't trust government at all, but a way to resolve it, a real easy way with no tax, is the 16th Amendment for the income tax from 1913. It was 1909 to 1913. It didn't get ratified correctly, or they said it was with what, 26, I can't remember, but only two ratified it, really. So it's illegal. And any IRS agent will tell you that. There's not one IRS commissioner there. It's all fraudulent. So why don't they just refund all the taxes we've paid in, and every person on the planet should be able, or in the country should get at least $1 million back, I'd say. So that would set us up all pretty nicely, don't you think?
So I
We have
love
a
your
corrupt government. Okay, that's my problem.
Yeah, I have a problem with the corrupt government too, Nikki, and it bothers the hell out of me. But I would argue that some parts of the government function and other parts don't. The ones that function the best are the ones that have diverse political appointees. And the reason for that is because when one side does something bad, the other side calls them out on it, and you get whistleblowers keeping people accountable. Right now, that is eroding under our current administration, where they're firing everyone that doesn't have their political ideology and they're replacing them with people who are incompetent. They're firing competent people. Replace. Oh, look at that! I got belled out, but I forgot to pause it when the when you were talking. They're basically hiring people with political ideology that agrees with them, and they're getting rid of the competent people of diverse political ideology. That makes government even less competent. And that's what worries me the most is that we're moving in a direction of less competence in government instead of more competence in government. We need the social sciences because right now, Nikki, I agree with you. Government is often incompetent, and I would much rather see the free market solve almost all problems. But I would also say that the government works as a good arbitrator with a big stick and a small staff. And what they're good at being is someone who gets paid to do what's fair instead of getting paid to do what's in their best interest. And they're good at that. And if you've ever worked with a Department of Insurance in your state, they're very good, effective arbitrators. They're not huge, they're small, but they have a big stick. And if an insurance company's not doing what they're supposed to, they get the crap beat out of them and they listen to the Department of
Okay.
Insurance.
Well, let me just give you an example,
Sure.
firsthand experience.
Hmm.
I ran for school board for one of those cities in San Diego, California,
Hmm.
and they were arguing over putting tampons in the boys' bathroom because of the gender ID,
That's ridiculous.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wasn't going to continue with it because it wasn't
But
anything what I would deal
Nikki,
with.
without
Okay?
people like you, who's going to speak reason to these people? That's
There is
ridiculous.
no reason. And the voting, there's no voting, there's no choice. The stock market is rigged. Everything is rigged.
Well,
Don't you know? It's all corrupt.
when you say
Everything.
everything is rigged and corrupt, what do you
Yes.
mean by that?
They manipulate it.
Who
You
does?
don't have the ones that are in control of the monetary system, the private, you don't even know their names. The ones that are on the board of the Federal Reserve, the heads, the elites.
Well, the
They
board of the Federal Reserve was appointed by Trump, and he actually fired the board of the Federal Reserve that he appointed because he wasn't doing what he said. So,
well, I just feel that there are people behind the scenes that you don't even know their names, okay? And they move the chess pieces on the chessboard, and we're just all players on that board, and you're just you can't believe half of what you're told. That's
so,
all.
Nikki, I will say there is a narrative of exactly what you're saying that's being psychographically targeted by conservatives to make everybody distrust government. It's a very active attempt to make everybody distrust government. And yes, government sucks a lot of the time, but I'm telling you, they're not as bad as you think. And there aren't this small percentage of elites that control everything. If there were, we wouldn't even have freedom. They would just enslave us all. If they were in that much control,
We
I
really
wouldn't be able to
don't.
say the shit that I say. I'd be
We
dead or
no,
in jail.
no, I know what you're saying, but what about that real ID? Once they have that, they have full control.
What do you mean by
So what
full
are you going to
control?
do
Real
about that?
ID is just a way to identify an individual uniquely so that we don't let terrorists into the government, no? Into
No, I
the
don't.
country.
That's a whole nother topic. I can't
I,
even.
I think she's talking about what's going on in Britain, where they're like putting people in jail for posts on social media.
We're
No, the real idea is how
If that,
you can be a target of military war weapons. Okay, you have to do your research. I'm sorry, but it's just too in depth.
Well, I do my research, but the Real ID is a U.S. federal security standard for driver's licenses and state-issued ID cards created to
It's
make identification documents harder to forge.
it's it's putting your biometrics with your ID, and so once you're all you know you don't want to go there because then they have like for example, I don't know if you're aware, but they can remotely cut off, they can cause a car accident remotely. They have control over vehicles and planes. Do you know that?
So when you say, do you know that? Why do you believe that in the first place?
Because I've done a lot of research with
Sure,
military intel, whistleblowers, etc. It's been years, okay, years and years. And
right.
so you have to do a lot of reading to get to a certain point of what is going on. They don't tell you.
Right. I've
They
done a
don't
lot
tell
of
you
reading.
half
I
of
just have
anything.
different conclusions than you do. And I would
Uh-huh.
strongly encourage you to come to our event on epistemology. I mentioned earlier in the event that I think you would enjoy it. And I think it'll be really important for you. And I would really like to hear about your epistemology specifically. Even before that event, I would like to talk with you about it if you're open to joining Discord. I would love to hear how you come to believe something is true. Like what gets you to believe, yes, this is fact.
Yeah, I think you have to have your own discernment. It
I
all comes
agree
from
100%.
your own
I would never,
critical
Nikki.
thinking, and you
Yep,
have to do your own decision making. No one
we
else can
agree.
tell you what's right for you.
Agreed.
And I'm here because I think you have a lot of good ideas,
Thank
and
you.
I hope the world goes the same way that you're pointing the right direction. I just feel that government is not the solution. I think we should all come together at a grassroots local level.
Nikki, Nikki, if I felt
Decentralization,
Yeah.
decentralization.
Nikki, if I felt government was the solution, I'd be running for office and I'd be asking all of you to support me. I'm not because I agree
No,
with you. I think the free
you could
markets,
do it. You could do it.
I mean, I could, but that's not what I think is the solution. Like
We're
I want to encourage people who are better at kissing butt than me that would get higher up in politics than I will. I don't kiss butts and I'm not good
I'm
at
not
getting into politics for that reason. I won't tell someone they're good if they're not. I'm just not going to lie to get ahead. And you don't like, I've talked to people who are from political families, and I know that's not a game I can play. I can't play in the current political realm. I'm just not good at it because I won't lie to get ahead. And at the end of the day, I would rather help support people who are good at that game and try to get them strategies that will help society be better. But I'm not gonna, I like, unless something
but
radically changes in my life, that's not likely to be my
are
future.
you aware of DARPA and all that they do? All the
I
crap
don't
that they
think DARPA is aware of all that DARPA does. If you ask one side of DARPA what the rest of DARPA does, they probably don't know. So, but Nikki,
okay.
I hate
I
to
know
say it, but I
I've
do
got
want to
it.
get to Anisha and Sarah, but I would
Garrett,
really,
I have a very quick question for you, Garrett.
please,
When you think of the millions of people who came out for No King's Parade a
yes,
few, are you a little bit more hopeful when maybe
I
we need
am.
to have a couple
I
more
am
of
in
those,
fact. Yes, Ginny, they surpassed the level of support that a country needs to overturn a dictator. That is a lot of hope for me. And the midterm elections, having a Democratic governors in Virginia and New
Right,
Jersey helps me.
right.
I don't love the Democrats, quite frankly, but I will say right now, Democrats are trying to get people health care. They're trying to help income inequality. They're trying to, do a lot of things that are good. And Trump is basically trying to like give more money to his friends and himself, enrich himself. The Emoluments Act says that everything Trump is doing is illegal. A $700 million plane as a gift from a foreign government, that's illegal. He should be in jail. But unfortunately, the Republican Congress will not hold him accountable because he is helping them win. What we have to get behind is winning is not what we should be about. Serving our political ideology is not what we should be about. What we should be about is fairness. Is it fair? Is it fair that the government of Switzerland, when they got high tariffs put on them, got Trump a gold watch and a gold bar and had those tariffs removed? Is that fair? Does anyone really want to defend that that's fair? I don't think you can. That's not fair. That's bribery. And our president should not be bribed. That's not the
Yeah,
country I want
yeah.
to live in.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
All
live here
right.
because I want to fight the good fight and try to make the country a better place. We are a country that has accepted immigrants from all over the world for centuries. Most of that time with unlimited amounts of immigration allowed, with no limits on immigration up until the early 20th century. And so we are a country of immigrants. And in fact, the Native Americans are the ones that got the most screwed. The
Yeah,
immigrants are the ones that have been the most successful. And that's another story for another day. We need to do another
yeah,
event on
yeah,
Native
yeah, yeah.
Americans. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to get to Anisha and Sarah, and then I want to get to yeah, Anisha and Sarah, and then if we have time, if Peter wants to go again, we'll come back to him.
Hi. So this is my opinion.
Yeah.
Instead of wealth redistribution from high to low or low to high, I think you should ban investment in real estate, like owning other people's homes. You may say it's always been like that for centuries, but just because it's always been like that doesn't mean that it should be. Jesus was not allowed to be born in an inn, so he was born in a stable. So I understand this goes way, way far back. Morally, I believe that owning another person's home is not right. I think I think stop the personal investment in other people's homes and also the super funds and corporate investment in other people's homes. There is a saying in white men can't jump. You either smoke or you get smoked, which is why I think this happens. Um, but people should just stop taking what is not theirs. This is just my personal opinion. I don't have a thesis on this or anything. I'm open to any feedback. Thanks.
Anisha, are you open to collaborating on an event where we research this together?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, let me put my email in the chat again just in case you don't have it. This is a fascinating concept. Like, I haven't heard someone propose that before. My gut says that the free markets will handle it better, but I also know that investment banks, like there was at least, I've seen things that investment banks have bought, thousands of homes, and then what they do is they buy homes in their own territory in order to like raise the value of all the rest of the homes. Because once one home in a neighborhood sells for a high amount, all the other homes are valued based on that as a comparison. So there's definitely a lot of corporate greed going on around home buying, which is making buying homes unaffordable. I don't know that what you're proposing is the right solution, but I would love to collaborate with you to discuss and like research together, is it the right solution or not? Because I'll tell you, half the time I do events, I don't know what the right solution is until I do the research. I have a hypothesis and I did here, but I actually don't know the answer until I do the research because how can I if I haven't actually done the research, if that makes sense? And I agree, and that's where I agree with Nikki that you have to do research. Now, maybe I don't agree with Nikki's conclusions, but I also want to hear why Nikki came to her conclusions. And hopefully, Nikki will hear why I came to my conclusions, and then we learn from each other. Or at least we've heard each other out, which is the important part. And I think that's what's missing in America and the world today. We don't hear each other out. We don't really listen with compassion to other people. We need more of that. And that's why we have
Regarding
listening to
buying
understand Trump supporters next week. Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
regarding buying homes, I've done several of that, and I typically will buy a rundown home that nobody would want to live in because it's not habitable. I'll
Great point,
fix it
Neil.
up, and then I'll rent it out to people who couldn't afford to buy it. So I'm a landlord to many people, and I've helped them get housing that they couldn't afford themselves.
Yeah. And that's why I say free markets might be good. And if you a good solution for this, but I would love to collaborate with you, Anisha. Let me make sure that I type my name in my email in the chat. But let me let Sarah go and then there we go.
So I was listening to, I think it's a
You're
brilliant.
very quiet.
Oh, what?
I'm turning up my volume, but go ahead.
Okay. So I think I really like this idea, but
I'm not hearing Sarah either.
Sarah, you're very quiet.
wait, hold on.
I can hear you when you turn your speaker out. Your
Better.
Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
Much better.
Okay. So I love this idea, and I feel like though, and I know a lot of people have brought this up. Chris actually had that, well, you didn't say it in this way, Chris, but I feel like it might be a band-aid for the larger problems because like when I think about it, it's like how do billionaires get to be billionaires, right? And we're talking about maximizing shareholder wealth. So is there a way to mitigate that and start instead of like, I think this is a good idea, but I feel like it doesn't get to the crux of the problem, which I do believe that
No.
possibly people are going to have those loopholes.
No, see, the thing is, like, the way that billionaires get to become billionaires is they solve meaningful problems for people that that help them. Most billionaires are entrepreneurs or business owners. They're running companies that solve meaningful problems for people in a way that they can charge a price that, they provide a service or a product at a price that's low to them but high to the consumer because the value of what they're doing is great. That is a huge economic benefit. That's something that we should reward. We shouldn't punish it. However, we should, and when I say reward, it doesn't mean that we have to give them tax giveaways. I'm already proposing that we should tax them once they become wealthy, but we should let them become wealthy. We want them to become wealthy because they become wealthy providing services that are good to society. If people didn't think their services were good for society, they wouldn't buy them. However, once they acquire all that wealth, we should take some of that wealth and give it back to the society, back to the average person, back to the community. And so it's actually good that people become billionaires. We want billionaires. Like billionaires are not bad. They're people that have added a huge amount. Like Elon Musk,
Right.
I hate the guy right now, but the guy made the electric vehicle a thing, and I'll always be thankful to him for that. Like we wouldn't have like
But
so
couldn't
many
he have
electric
done
cars
that?
today without him.
Right, but couldn't he have done that getting paid less?
Yes, and that's what
Because
generous capitalism is about.
Yeah,
Generous
so I think
capitalism is
that
about
is what I,
giving
yeah,
that money to everybody. What we need to do is encourage more companies and entrepreneurs. And I don't think companies are going to do it because they're run by a lot of egotists most of the time. And they're generally not that way. Although I will give credit to Costco. Costco is a generous capitalist business without ever having heard of the term. They decide what their margin is going to be. They calculate what they need to charge to get that margin, and they charge the least amount they can to the consumer. They give the best deal they can to the consumer while, helping their stockholders get a good return. Nobody does that. Nobody charges the least amount they can get away
right.
with. Costco does. I'm going to become a
So,
Costco member and
so
drive 30 minutes just to buy from Costco because I love the freaking
right,
company.
right. It's a good company.
It's a
But
gr-
so
it, they are. They
wouldn't,
also pay their employees well. They pay their suppliers well.
right. So wouldn't your idea of what did you call it?
Generous
Wealth,
capitalism.
generous capitalism, wouldn't I feel like if you dealt with that first, wouldn't that kind of take care of the problem? But you think you should do both.
I think we should do both. I think that we should like promote generous capitalism, and we should have a wealth tax. And quite frankly, I think we should have a death tax too. Dead people don't need their money. And the kids of dead people don't need more than, I think that $10 million dollars you should be able to pass down to the next generation, like tax free. But over $10 million, $10 million is enough that you can make $1 million a year, or really, let me put it this way, you can make $700,000 a year for the rest of your life and have it increase according to inflation without ever making a dollar less for the rest of your life. So if you can give $10 million tax free to every one of your kids, why do you need to pass on more? But let
Right.
me make that argument another day and let the conservatives shoot holes in it. So,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's it. I think I agree with that.
but I think all of
The
these
both,
things, it's about
both.
fairness. It's
Yeah.
like, does Elon Musk's next 100 generations not need to work for the rest of their lives? Is that fair?
Right.
Bill Clinton said, originally he would have been the same thing, but now he's joining the Berkshire Hathaway, the Warren Buffett camp and saying, I'm going to give away most of my money in my lifetime. And
Mhm.
man, that's just like, wow, what a cool guy, right? Like I admire, he's one of my people that I really admire, and I'm hoping that I make enough money that I can have that kind of mantra. I'm not doing
Well,
badly, but I want to make more. And when I make more, I want to use it to do good in the world with the FTI.
so you don't think that regulating corporations that don't pay, I mean, I get
Yeah,
that's what you're
corporations should
saying
have to
with
pay
that.
tax. I do think
Right, right.
corporations should pay tax.
Right. And then
And
that would
corporations like
ultimately,
my former employer, General Electric, I was given tasks that basically helped them save money on tax that were tax benefits that went to that were made by lobbyists that saved them tons of tax that small companies couldn't use, which basically was a redistribution of wealth. It was giving a competitive advantage to the people
right.
with the most money and screwing over all the small businesses is part of why I left, because it didn't feel fair. And even
Are
though I
you
did very well there, like it didn't feel fair and I didn't want to be a part of that anymore.
are you gonna do something on your on Woody? Sorry, I keep forgetting the name that
Generous
you call it.
capitalism.
Yeah, are you gonna do
I've done it twice,
a
so it's
paper?
on YouTube. Please watch the YouTube.
Okay.
We try to do new stuff every time so that we're covering new material and then I point people to the YouTube for the old stuff.
Okay, I'll watch it. I'll watch
Yeah,
it.
we had a bunch of old ones that got lost, and so we'll redo those. But I try to cover new stuff every time because there's so much to cover. Even
Yeah.
tonight, guys, I mentioned like
Social
5 to 10
science.
videos that you could watch about things that we touched on, but I didn't go into them in detail because we don't have time. We
Yeah.
spend 2.25 hours together, but we don't have time to go through more than one thing in detail. And I really think it's important to get into the detail because, and I think Nikki left, but to Nikki's point, we have to do our own research and we have to really understand the facts at hand and like what are the pros and cons of things and use our critical thinking. We all have to use our own critical thinking. I don't tell anyone here to agree with me about what I presented tonight just because I said it. Who am I to ask for that? And who is anyone to ask for that? Even if someone's an expert in a field, if they're an expert in a field, they should have a really good, convincing argument to believe them. And if they don't, well, sorry, I'm not impressed. You have to have a good logical argument, or I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. And you know what? I've gone to PhD presentations where I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. Like people did papers on things that were so not really interesting, and not insightful, or worse, misleading. There was a study that said happiness stops at $75,000 a year of income. That was such a flawed study. I read the study itself and it was so flawed. It's absolutely false. Like they created that study in a way that there was no other way to get the conclusion other than what they found. Like it was ridiculous. So anyway, I'm digressing, but I do have to put my kids to bed and they're telling me I'm keeping them up. So have to go, but it was really fun, guys. Thank you, especially the people who disagreed with me. I want you to come back. I want, diverse opinions here. That's what the Free Thinker Institute is about. It's diverse opinions. We don't all have to agree with each other, but it's important we listen with an open mind to each other because that's where we learn the most. And if we're seeking truth when we listen with an open mind, we will learn so much from each other. And I learn from all of you every event we do, even if I've spent 5 to 15 hours, 10 to 15 hours preparing, I still learn from the audience every time I present. So I hope we learn from each other. And I want to thank you all for your comments, your suggestions, your questions. Thank you all so much. I like to say the guests make the party.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Garrett.
Garrett.
Have a great night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Garrett. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Garrett.
Thank you,
Good night.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Have a good one.